Hey guys, Vice Bump here, bringing you this 10.2 Unholy Death Knight Beginner Rotation Guide. This video is for all you guys out there who's picking up the Unholy Death Knight for the first time and wants an updated beginner video where you learn all the basics without going too much in depth. I will get you 95% way of the way there without, bringing in lots of min-max things we really don't need to care about when you first start off. We will be discussing the core rotation. We'll also talk about cooldown management, how you do cleave in a raid scenario, and how you do damage in a Mythic Plus scenario. Before we get into that though, let's talk about the really basics about the Unholy Death Knight. So to start off, resources. We have two primary resources that are called runes and runic power. Runes are these little circular death skull thingies under your character portrait. You see them up here. They recharge passively over time, taking 10 seconds to recharge, and that is then decreased by haste. So 100% haste, it would take just 5 seconds. Importantly, only 3 of them can recharge at the same time. So if you spend all of them, you'll see that it's only 3 of them that kind of start recharging, and the other 3 will wait. If you have 3 runes recharging, that's kind of like the maximum amount of recharging you can get, and that's what we call like the optimal way of recharging runes. Spending runes generates our other resource, which is runic power, at the rate of 10 runic power per rune spent. So if you spend 2 runes, that will give you 20 runic power, and runic power is then spent on other abilities. They're kind of like spenders. It's not like classical where spenders are much more powerful than builders, the rune cost abilities. So it's kind of like, they're equally valuable generally. We also get runic power from other sources that we'll get into later. So it's not only spending runes, we get it passively and other things, right? Now, we also have kind of like a secondary resource, which is festering runes. So this is a debuff which we apply to our target, and our core rotation is about managing that debuff. So we spend our primary resources to build and spend our secondary resource, which is the runes on the target. Anyway, so that's the resources. Let's get into how that fits into the core rotation. So the core rotation has essentially 3 primary buttons we'll be pressing. So we have Festering Strike, Skirt Strike, and Death Call. These are by far the buttons you will be pressing most in any given single target counter encounter. So Festering Strike, it costs 2 runes, right? That will also generate 20 runic power, as talked about before. That will apply between 2 and 3 festering runes on target. It's 50-50 what you get. Skirt Strike, it costs 1 rune, generates 10 runic power, and that bursts 1 wound on the target. And then Death Call costs 30 runic power, so that's the button you use to spend your runic power. So the whole rotation is about pressing Festering Strike to apply festering wounds to the target. You then press Skirt Strike to burst these wounds, and then you spend your runic power with Death Call. Simple as that. Furthermore, we have a dot we need to apply, which is called Virulent Plague. We press Outbreak to apply that one. If you have Unholy Blight, which is a talent you pick up, you will use that instead. But generally, Outbreak will be like a button you use to maintain your plague, and that's you press like every 30 seconds or so not very often. It's also not very powerful, the plague, so it's not that important to keep it up, but you should aim to have 100% uptime generally. And then finally, we have a proc that comes into our rotation. It's called Sudden Doom. It comes up with your auto attack. It makes your Death Call cost no runic power, so it makes that free cost. Finally, when the target you're fighting reaches 35% health, we're going to introduce Soul Reaper. This has a 6-second cooldown and should be pressed as much as possible. It just deals a huge amount of damage to anything that is 35% or lower HP. Right, so that's kind of like a core rotation. I would say, if you're wondering, okay, how many wounds should I have on your target? You press Festering Strike to apply wounds, and then you press Skirt Strike to go back to 0. And then you press Festering Strike, and then you Skirt Strike back to 0. And you keep going that way. Never Skirt Strike without any wounds to the target. And never Festering Strike if you have too many. If you have like 3 or 4, don't Festering Strike. sorry, if you have 4 or more, don't Festering Strike because you end up overcapping wounds, which is not a good idea. Alright, so let's talk about Unholy cooldowns, because this is where I would say, most difficulty comes into play as Unholy Death Knight, simply because there are so many. So to simplify things, we think about the cooldowns in 4 to 5 second windows. So as a Unholy Death Knight, every 45 seconds you will be pressing some cooldowns. Let's take a look at what those cooldowns are exactly, and how you would actually approach a given raid encounter with the cooldowns. So on pull, you will use all cooldowns, right? I will have them up here. There's loads of them. I will talk about the opener later on, so don't worry about the exact order. We'll discuss that, but on pull, use everything. At 45 seconds, you will use Dark Transformation and Apocalypse and Unholy Blight if you pick up that talent. At 1 minute 30, use Unholy Blight, Dark Transformation, Apocalypse, and Unholy Assault. At 2 minute 15, you use Unholy Blight, Dark Transformation, Apocalypse. And then at 3 minutes, everything aligns back up and you use it all again. Importantly, Empower Wound Weapon is delayed by a minute. So that has a 2 minute cooldown, but we actually delay it to 3 minutes to use it. And this is how it works. Essentially, you're going to press all your cooldowns as soon as they come up. Whenever you kind of delay things, that's just going to cause difficulties down the line. I mean that your big 3 minute burst window gets ruined. One thing I do need to mention with the cooldowns is Apocalypse. You should have 4 wounds on the target when you use that, which means you need to plan in advance, because generally we're going to stay close to 0. So if Apocalypse is coming up, you need to Festering Strike a little bit more so that you get your wounds up to 4+. Okay, wound. Right, that's cooldowns for you. Before we get into the opener, here's the sponsor of this video. U.GG is a website that started out with League of Legends build recommendations and have now moved into the realm of World of Warcraft. This will give you statistically based recommendations for builds, talents, kind of gear, all those kind of things, which you can use to get like a snapshot of the current, I would say, Frost Unholy meta to see what other players are running and get an insight into kind of like how the distribution looks like. So on the website, you can go, for instance, to Unholy Death Knight. This will, at start of 10.2, be quite volatile because it takes a while for people to pick up all the gear and kind of converge towards the abyss in a sense. Still, it gives you, currently, we're in Mythic Plus, it gives you like the most popular Mythic Plus build here. You can see how many people actually play this in any given dungeon. You can see the max key it has done, that kind of info. And it, not surprisingly, this is the standard kind of Mythic Plus build, which I would recommend in my videos as well. You can see there's a recommendation for the gear. This importantly contains what trinkets people like running, which is a good one. A lot of this is related to crafting currently. So lots of gear pieces, like people will fill in with gear, which means that they're very quite popular. In 10.2, this won't be the case, so this is going to be a bit more clear exactly what people are running. Also, for instance, like the weapon, there would definitely be like Ashkunda currently, that would be best, but not a lot of people have it that play Myth Plus, probably because they don't raid Mythic. So there's also quite a lot of biases you need to consider when you look at these exact recommendations. All right, so we covered the core rotation, we covered the cooldowns. Let's talk about the opener, because opener is really important for the Unholy Death Knight, because that's so much of damage coming into that specific part. So got it up here. Here's the opener. Put this next to you when you play and just execute this exactly as it stands, right? It doesn't change depending on procs, right? And generally, there won't be a talent choice you will actually make that changes this. So just look at that, memorize it, and make sure you press those abilities in that exact order, right? The reason we press it in that order is kind of like to manage and optimize the buff overlap with like summon Gargoyle and an army undead, but I won't go too much into detail for that. For trinkets, you can use those with Unholy Assault. In patch 10.2, all the good trinkets are 20-second duration, so they fit really nice with Unholy Assault. When it comes to your racials, it's really only Berserking, which should be used 10 seconds after your gargle. That fits nicely into when you use your second Deafening K. And with, what's that called? The Orc one, you can put that with Unholy Assault, and that's fine. Now, what do we do once we executed the specific set opener? Because we don't just go into our normal rotation. Well, the whole point is to buff up your Summon Gargle cooldown, which you can see we used there. It gets buffed when you spend Runic Power, and we're going to do that by pressing Death Call a lot. Death Call essentially becomes the top priority. So when Gargle is down and you execute the opener, you just want to press Death Call as soon as possible, right? So as soon as you go above 30 or you get a Sudden Doom proc, press that Death Call. That's pretty much it. When it comes to like Festoon Strike and Scourge Strike, it's the same rule. Scourge down to 0, then Festoon Strike kind of thing. That's what you want to do. All right. At the 3-minute mark, do the exact same thing, right? Try and execute the exact same opener. It's going to be difficult. Everything is kind of, the cooldown's going to come back up. You might have some delay and things. Wait until everything is ready and then execute that opener again exactly as you did on pool. And that's going to be like the go-to. Now, in a raid environment, how do we deal with Cleave? Because that's going to happen. It's going to be ads coming up that we want to do maximum damage with. It's quite simple. We use our Deafening K ability. When you pop that down, it means that your primary, like your Scourge Strike, cleaves. So whenever there are ads, you should dot them up with an upbreak, pop down your Deafening K, and then just spam Scourge Strike. Right? If you are running a build with Epidemic, you're going to spend Epidemic instead of Death Call for your Runic Power spender. That's going to deal a lot of damage to any ads that come in. Finally, let's talk about Mythic Rotation, because this is really quite different from the raid one. So in Mythic Plus, your damage comes from essentially 3 sources: Epidemic, your Virulent Plague, and Defile. That's going to be your damage, and your whole rotation is about optimizing how much you can press those abilities, right? You essentially want to generate as much Runic Power as possible so that you can spend in Epidemic. This is the disease build, by the way. I will do like dedicated Myth Class videos if you want to look at the wound build, which is an alternative, but we'll talk about the disease build. Anyway, let's talk about it from the perspective of when you approach a pack. So I have the opener up here. What you're going to do as you run towards the pack, you're going to pop down Defile, you're going to press Scourge Strike, and then you're going to apply your dots. Those 3 things should be done every single time you engage a pack. It gets your Defile buff going, gives you Mastery. It gives you Plague Bringer. That's what the Scourge Strike is for. It gives me the dot deal a lot more damage. And it also applies the dots. Those 3 things are your priority on the start of every pack. Once you're done with that, just use all the cooldowns you have available, right? It's a pretty good rule. Like, always just send your cooldowns when they are up. So this is going to be like Unholy Blight. You'd use that instead of your Outbreak to apply dot, by the way. Dark Transformation, Apocalypse, Unholy Assault, Abomination Limb, Power Weapon. Just make sure you use all of those. Once that's out of the way, we go into kind of like the core Myth Plus rotation, which is you press Scourge Strike to cleave in your Defile. You put down Defile when the all one has finished, and then you just spend your Runic Power on Epidemic, and you just keep going through those 3 things. So spam Scourge Strike to cleave, Epidemic to spend Runic Power, and then pop down new Defiles, and so on. Definitely prioritize spending Runic Power. Like, Epidemic is going to be like by far the most damage you do, so just make sure to spam that away. And you will use that whenever there's more than 2 targets. So any AoE scenario, just use Epidemic. You might ask, well, hang on, where's Festoon Strike? How do we manage the wounds? Well, the answer is you don't. Festoon Strike is essentially not used in AoE. The only situation where we actually do use it is when we run out of Defile charges. So if the pool lasts for like a long time and you end up, right, not having Defile down, you would then Festoon Strike and then press Scourge Strike to burst those wounds. But generally, you would press Festoon Strike very little in a Mythic Plus environment. All right, that's a very beginner kind of Mythic Plus rotation. So hopefully that was easy to understand. I will make loads more videos about talking about the difficulties, right, with Unholy Myth class. Anyway, that's everything I had for you guys today. Leave a comment down below. Let me know if this was useful, if you liked it, disliked, that kind of vibe. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you, and bye-bye.